Since last year, the United States has seen a sharp increase in violent attacks against Asians, especially Chinese. In fact, more than 2,800 such cases have occurred across the United States. Among them, New York and California have become the hardest hit areas, accounting for almost half of the country's total. There have even been cases of serious injuries and deaths, which triggers the social panic. Regarding such cases, there has been some blames on the internet, but there's always more said than being done by the officials. Law enforcement officials lack investigations into the background and motives of the perpetrators committing the crime, and their scarce accountability is questioned. The mainstream media has only focused on the previous government's remarks about the China virus. As we face this raging wave of crimes against Asians, every Chinese must not only maintain zero tolerance, but also dig into the reason behind it and whether it is because the Trump statement of the virus coming from China triggered this situation, as the mainstream media says. This statement affects the people knowingly or unknowingly, thereby causing the people to discriminate and retaliate against Chinese people. To clarify the facts, relevant information was analyzed and compared with previous hate crimes cases against other ethnic groups. The reason behind the attacks against the Chinese people overseas is not simple. Presently, the mainstream media blames the outbreak of these hatred cases on Trump's statements about the China virus, in which perpetrators associate the virus with anyone who looks Asian. The mainstream media rely on the offender's view of things rather than investigating into the background and motives behind. If these crimes against Chinese are really due to the spread of the CCP virus, which caused the right wings to hate and retaliate against the CCP, why did most of these cases occur in Democratic states rather than Republican states where the right-wing forces have the upper hand? What is even more strange is that such cases often occur during the day and in densely populated areas. This kind of deliberate exposure in public reveals the hatred and simultaneously does not seem to reveal worry about the legal consequences which may follow. According to online video evidence, many perpetrators are ethnic minorities, conflicting with the media's white supremacy label. Additionally, judging from the information of some criminals published on the internet, these people had multiple criminal prosecutions before the epidemic. Moreover, regardless of their motives of ignoring the law, their actions to repeatedly commit similar crimes should not be simply concluded as due to virus or political statements. Rather, the media should consider whether other organization has participated in the crime or there are other beneficiaries of this attack. Otherwise, we're just looking for excuses for such habitual offenders. These crimes may also create new prejudices and bring greater social discrimination to Trump supporters who have been stigmatized for no reason. Equally affected by the virus, why do Republican states which support Trump appear to be calmer in this hatred for China, while the Democratic states which are more opposed to Trump suffer more? As we all know, the latter's publicity against racial discrimination is louder and more invested. The former emphasizes the rule of law, order, fairness, and justice. Judging from the actual results, the effectiveness of preventing trouble before it happens is the key. It's like a criminal swagger onto the street and commits an attack but is let go with almost zero consequences, meaning even if he is prosecuted, he has a lighter sentence or is released on bail. This lack of law enforcement protection creates a breeding ground for any crime. As long as there is little turmoil, one can be let go. These seeds of evil, which are truly buried in the heart, never fail to take root and spare no ethnicity. Minneapolis has experienced a 250% increase in shooting incidents in the past year due to the violent demonstration Black Lives Matter that asked to defund the police commenced by the Floyd incident. Apparently, the general rise in violent crime is also an important background for the increase in violent cases against Asians. Let's take California and New York, the two largest Democratic states, as examples. California passed Bill 487 in the past 2 years, stipulating that the theft of property below $950 is not considered a crime. In early 2020, New York implemented new bail reforms. The law allows some light sentence crimes to be released without paying bail. This evil result of giving criminals the green light was revealed in this case against the Chinese. Many perpetrators have previously committed multiple crimes, even violent crimes, committed crimes again with no remorse. Some victims stated that the offenders went to the police station to make a record and was released without any punishment. Salman Muflihi, an Indian suspect who severely wounded a Chinese with a knife in Manhattan, has been accused of assaulting on 3 occasions and has not been punished. At the beginning of this investigation, Muflihi was filed by the police as a hate crime second-degree attempted murder, but on the second day, the Manhattan District Attorney dropped his hate crime charge and filed him as only violent injuries and holding the knife illegally. Coincidentally, Anthony Watson, a 19-year-old black man, was not prosecuted for committing a hate crime after he violently killed an elderly Thai man in San Francisco. In stark contrast to the slogan of the Democratic Party's chanting against racial hatred, politicians have promoted policies that are increasingly conducive to criminals in an actual implementation. It is not surprising that law enforcement agencies have such a passive attitude of investigating cases when facing these policies. In the past, mainstream media reported on violent crimes, especially hate crimes, published photos and backgrounds of the perpetrators, and dug deeper into criminal motives, eventually focusing on systemic discrimination and institutional accountability. For example, 3 white policemen in Minneapolis caused the death of Floyd due to excessive law enforcement. The media immediately focused public opinion on the police officers who enforced the law violently and led the public opinion to discuss systematic racism, which in turn aroused BLM demonstrations and the defund the police movement across the United States. Regarding this more severe and more directed violence against Asians, the mainstream media has changed its style. There are very few photos that expose the criminals, but the photos of the victims can be found anywhere. No one cares about the identity, background, and the political stance of the perpetrators. The media only cares whether the perpetrator mentioned the China virus and then attributes the motive for violence to the Trump administration. As for whether law enforcement agencies conduct fair investigation and prosecutions and whether criminals receive due punishment, it is not the focus of media attention. We support every politician who stands up to speak for the Chinese, but the premise is to be sincere in order to solve the safety problems of the Chinese, and not to curb donations and harvest votes. Too many politicians just yell in the media spotlight. When they really touch on actual problems, they use no minority against minority as an excuse. They don't pursue the identity and background of the thugs and the motives behind them. They only seek peace and dare not offend both sides. 2 weeks ago, the Chinese Democratic candidate Andrew Yang and some Chinese pro-communist groups organized a rally in New York called Anti-Hate Speaks for Asians. At this rally, we only saw vague appeals such as Stop Hate Crime and We Are Not Virus, but no one calls for investigation, accountability, and public knowledge of the case. They even advocated no racism over racism so that the media should not focus on the skin color and the identity of the mob. I communicated with the organizer of this event online, expressing that I hope to participate in this parade, because I advocate speaking up for the Chinese and appealing to call on the police to strengthen law enforcement to conduct fair and open investigations. In the end, my request was rejected by the organizer. The reason they gave was that Trump supporters are not welcome to participate and they do not want to be disrupted. Obviously, this event is not like the organizer has described to unite Chinese and speak with one voice. because in their view, the demand for justice is an act of chaos that undermines the unity of ethnic minorities. Menacing virus hatred against China, although there appear to be some unrelated cases, it cannot be ruled out whether there is some kind of force behind that premeditated, organized and violent incident to guide public opinion. From the above analysis, we can see that many unreasonable linkages are appearing at the same time. They all point to the same result. Let people transfer the condemnation of Chinese with hatred and violence towards the condemnation of the source of the virus. They use the name China virus to cause hate crimes. In this way, they not only put the responsibility of racial conflicts on the former administration, but also pave the way for public opinion to cover up the source of the virus. In this way, the CCP has become the biggest beneficiary of this anti-virus and anti-China incident. In fact, we also found some clues from the internet. At the beginning of last year, a non-profit organization called Anti-AAPL Hate appeared in the United States. According to Wikipedia, as early as January 2020, this organization was composed of 3 Chinese organizations closely related to the CCP: Asia Pacific Policy and Planning Council, Chinese for Affirmative Action, and San Francisco State University Asian American Studies Department. Its mission is to deal with the impact of hostility towards Asians caused by the CCP virus. From the beginning, before the virus entered the US, the American government had no issues with public discrimination against Asians. This organization started earlier than the pandemic, seemingly foreseeing the coming of this storm earlier than the American people. What's more noteworthy is that among the 3 pro-communist organizations, the Chinese for Affirmative Action, which has the closest relationship with the CCP and was extremely active in the operations of hatred, has supported the California Assembly Constitution Amendment No. 5 Act, created extreme damage to Chinese American interests. The CAA organization and the Chinese Progressive Association, according to the Epoch Times, are 2 peas in the pod. The latter has been revealed to fund the BLM organization and intervene in the 2020 US presidential election. It is an important tool for the CCP to penetrate the Chinese society in the United States. The CAA has an official Weibo account in China, and the purpose of it is to spread the CCP's propaganda content on various Chinese forums in North America throughout the year. They use this way to enhance the CCP's image overseas. And it also supports the extreme leftist movements, vigorously incites the Chinese to confront American conservative forces, and tries to suppress the opposition. The CAA tries to fight information concerning the evidence of the origin of the virus and discredit the whistleblower movement and Trump to hide the tracks of the CCP virus. The Black Lives Matter movement, the CCP's financial support during the riots, as well as Mr. Guo's disclosure of the CCP's 3F plan to mess up the United States, shows collective traits and similarities. As we have seen the CCP try to clean up a global mess and hide the origin of the virus, we cannot rule out that the CCP cooperated with the extreme leftist forces, planned and instigated the entire movement in an organized and premeditated manner. They, together with the BLM and Antifa organizations, incited violence, created trouble, intimidated and pacified the Chinese, and then appeared as saviors to discredit Trump supporters. They helped the Democratic candidates they support to obtain donations and vote in Democratic states, and at the same time shifted the focus of public opinion to completely cover up the truth about the origin of the CCP virus. This plot is like killing 3 birds with 1 stone. We call on the relevant authorities to have in-depth background checks on the perpetrators when collecting evidence of these violent cases against the Chinese. Authorities should not conclude these attacks to the Chinese by simply believing their words of China virus alone. We must thoroughly investigate what this means. We need to know the missions and political stances of these organizations to find out whether they are funding or condemning such violence. We must not let the Chinese tragedy become a tool for some people to earn money, let alone making the perpetrators to become the biggest beneficiaries.